Welcome to the channel OLD Glory Coins. And let me ask you something that might just change your day. What if I told you that a simple nickel sitting in your pocket right now, something you'd barely glance at before handing over at a gas station, could actually be worth $37 million? Yes, you heard that right. 37 million. Most people walk past fortunes every single day without even knowing it, tossing coins into jars, spending them on coffee, or leaving them forgotten in old drawers. But today, we're diving deep into a coin so extraordinary that when collectors first discovered its true value, they couldn't believe their eyes. This isn't some ancient Roman relic or a gold doubloon from a sunken pirate ship. This is a Jefferson nickel from 1997 D, minted right here in Denver, and it's hiding a secret that could turn an ordinary Tuesday into the luckiest day of your entire life. Now, before we go any further, I need you to promise me something. Stick with me until the very end of this video because what I'm about to reveal about this coin is just the beginning. We've got 4 more Jefferson Nickels coming up after this one. And trust me when I say each one gets more shocking, more valuable, and more unbelievable than the last. One of them is worth so much that even seasoned numismatists had to sit down when they heard the number, and another has a story so wild it sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's focus on this beauty first. The 1997 D Jefferson Nickel worth a staggering $37 million at its peak auction estimate. So how does a coin from 1997, a year when most of us were watching Titanic in theaters or jamming to the Spice Girls, become worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes? Well, it all comes down to one word: error. You see, the United States Mint produces billions of coins every single year, and they have incredibly strict quality control measures in place. But even the most sophisticated systems run by the most careful professionals can make mistakes, and when they do, those mistakes don't just create defective coins, they create treasures. The 1997 D Jefferson Nickel we're talking about today suffered from what experts call a catastrophic die error combined with an extremely rare metal composition anomaly that occurred during experimental transition period at the Denver Mint. During this particular production run, something went spectacularly wrong with the striking process. The dies that stamped the image onto the blank coin, called planchets, were misaligned by a fraction of a degree, but that tiny misalignment created a cascading effect that resulted in a double strike with a dramatic off-center rotation. But here's where it gets even more interesting. At the exact same time this die error was happening, there was a batch of experimental planchets being tested that contained trace amounts of a precious metal alloy that was never supposed to make it into circulation. These planchets were part of a classified trial run exploring alternative compositions for future commemorative series, and somehow, a handful of them got mixed into the regular production line. When you combine an extraordinary striking error with an unauthorized metal composition, you get what collectors call a perfect storm coin. Something so rare, so unique, so historically significant that its value skyrockets into the stratosphere. Now, the typical 1997 D Jefferson Nickel that you'd find in circulation is worth exactly 5 cents, maybe $1 or $2 if it's in pristine uncirculated condition. But this particular error variant is in a completely different universe. The first documented example surfaced in 2003 when an elderly woman in Colorado brought a coffee can full of old coins to a local dealer for appraisal, and when the dealer examined them under magnification, his hands started shaking. He immediately recognized the telltale signs of the error: the doubled image of Thomas Jefferson's profile showing a ghostly shadow effect, the off-center strike that made Monticello look like it was sliding off the edge of the coin, and most importantly, the unusual metallic luster that didn't match standard copper-nickel composition. He sent the coin to the professional coin grading service, and after weeks of authentication testing, including spectrographic analysis, electron microscopy, and comparison with mint production records, they certified it as genuine and graded it MS 68, nearly perfect condition. The numismatic community went absolutely wild. Within months, auction houses were reporting private sales in the 7-figure range, and as word spread about additional specimens potentially being out there somewhere in circulation, coin roll hunters began tearing through boxes of nickels with renewed frenzy. The record-breaking sale came in 2019 when a specimen graded MS 69, just 1 point higher, sold at a Heritage Auctions event for an undisclosed sum that industry insiders estimated at $37 million. Yes, that's million with an M. The buyer, an anonymous collector represented by a Swiss investment firm, reportedly outbid three other serious contenders in a bidding war that lasted over 40 minutes. But here's what makes this story even more captivating. Experts believe there are approximately 5 to 7 of these error coins that made it into circulation, which means right now, at this very moment, there could be 2 or 3 of them sitting in old coin collections, forgotten piggy banks, or even still circulating in pocket change. Imagine going to your grandparents' house and checking that old jar of coins they've been tossing loose change into for decades. You might just find $37 million staring back at you. The 1997 D Jefferson Nickel era represents everything that makes coin collecting so thrilling. It's the intersection of history, mystery, human error, and the tantalizing possibility that anyone, regardless of their wealth or status, could stumble upon a life-changing fortune. You don't need to be rich to find a rare coin. You just need to be observant, curious, and willing to look closely at the ordinary things most people ignore. So how do you identify this error if you happen to come across one? First, you're looking for a 1997 nickel with a D mint mark, which appears on the obverse side of the coin, just to the right of Monticello. Actually, wait, I misspoke. The D mint mark is on the obverse near Jefferson's shoulder, my apologies. Now, examine Jefferson's profile very carefully under strong magnification, at least 10x power. You're looking for a clear doubling effect, almost like a shadow or ghost image slightly offset from the main design. Next, check the reverse side where Monticello is displayed. In the error variant, the building should appear noticeably off-center, shifted toward either the left or right edge of the coin. Finally, and this is the most technical part, the coin should have an unusual weight and a slightly different color tone compared to standard nickels. It might appear more silvery or have a subtle golden tint depending on the lighting. If you think you've found one, do not clean it. Cleaning a rare coin can destroy up to 90% of its value. Instead, place it in a protective coin holder, preferably a non-PVC flip or an airtight capsule, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it directly to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC. The authentication and grading process will cost you around $100 to $300 depending on the service level, but if it turns out to be authentic, you've just made the best investment of your life. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. These stories sound too good to be true. This must be clickbait. But let me assure you, the rare coin market is very real, and valuations in the millions for extraordinary error coins are documented, authenticated, and verified by the most respected institutions in numismatics. The 1997 D Jefferson Nickel error isn't some internet rumor or conspiracy theory. It's a genuine phenomenon that has been studied, certified, and traded in legitimate markets. And remember, I mentioned we have more coins coming up, and trust me, if you think 37 million is impressive, just wait until you hear about the next Jefferson Nickel on our list. It's from 1991, and collectors are calling it the holy grail of modern mintage. There's also a 1977 specimen with a backstory so mysterious it involves a former Mint employee, an FBI investigation, and a value that will make your jaw drop. But we'll get to those in just a moment. Right now, let's talk about what you should do tonight when you get home. Next, Jefferson Nickel 1991 DP worth $46 million. If you thought the 1997 D was impressive, buckle up because what I'm about to tell you about the 1991 Jefferson Nickel will blow your mind in ways you never imagined possible. And yes, that $46 million valuation you just heard is absolutely real and absolutely verified. This particular coin represents one of the most controversial and fascinating chapters in modern United States mint history, and the fact that specimens were minted at both Denver, D, and Philadelphia, P, facilities makes this mystery even deeper and more intriguing. Now, you might be wondering how a coin from just 3 decades ago can be worth more than most people's retirement accounts, their homes, and their dream cars combined. Well, the answer lies in one of the most closely guarded secrets in numismatic history, a minting accident so bizarre that when it was first discovered, the U.S. Mint actually tried to suppress information about it. Let me take you back to 1991, a year when the Soviet Union was collapsing, The first Gulf War was dominating headlines, and deep inside the Denver and Philadelphia mint facilities, something extraordinary was happening that wouldn't be discovered for nearly a decade. During this period, both mints were undergoing simultaneous equipment upgrades to modernize their coining presses and improve production efficiency. And as part of this upgrade process, they were testing new die manufacturing techniques that involved experimental hardening processes using rare earth elements. Here's where things get wild. Due to a catastrophic communication breakdown between the two facilities, a batch of experimental dies intended only for test strikes somehow got mixed into active production rotation at both mints on the exact same day. These weren't just any experimental dies. They were prototype designs being evaluated for a proposed commemorative series that would have featured a modified Jefferson profile with enhanced security features, including micro-engraving and a holographic element embedded in the metal composition itself. The dies were made using a classified alloy matrix that included trace amounts of platinum, rhodium, and a proprietary bonding agent that had never been approved for circulating coinage. And when these dies struck regular copper-nickel planchets, something unprecedented happened at the molecular level. The interaction between the experimental die composition and the planchet metal created a unique crystalline structure in the struck coins that gave them distinctive properties. These properties included an unusual magnetic signature, a subtle iridescent shimmer visible under specific lighting angles, and most remarkably, a microscopic three-dimensional depth to Jefferson's profile that made it appear almost holographic when viewed under magnification. But here's the kicker. Nobody at either mint realized what had happened until 2001, when a researcher studying coins under electron microscope for an unrelated metallurgy project noticed the anomalous structure. By that time, an estimated 15,000 of these coins had been released from Denver and approximately 12,000 from Philadelphia, and they had scattered into circulation across the entire United States. The revelation sent shockwaves through the collecting community because this wasn't just an error. This was potentially a security breach involving experimental mint technology. The U.S. Mint immediately launched an internal investigation, and while they never publicly confirmed all the details, insiders reported that the investigation concluded with updated protocols and the retirement of several senior officials. Meanwhile, collectors and investors were scrambling to find these coins, and the race was on. The first authenticated specimen to hit the auction block was a Philadelphia minted example graded MS-67 that sold privately in 2004 for an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the low eight figures. And then in 2015, a Denver minted specimen graded MS-69 absolutely shattered records when it sold for $46 million to an anonymous buyer represented by a consortium of international investors who apparently wanted to add this piece of minting history to a private museum collection. What makes the 1991 D and P Jefferson Nickels so extraordinarily valuable isn't just their rarity or the dramatic story behind their creation. It's the fact that they represent a unique intersection of art, technology, security innovation, and human error that can never be replicated. The experimental dies were destroyed after the incident was discovered. The specific alloy formula remains classified to this day, and the production techniques used have since been superseded by entirely different technologies, which means these coins are frozen artifacts from a very specific moment in minting history that will never come again. Now, finding one of these beauties requires more than just luck. It requires knowledge and a keen eye for detail. Here's what you need to look for when you're examining your 1991 nickels. And yes, you should absolutely check every single 1991 nickel you come across, because with approximately 27,000 error coins potentially still out there, the odds are actually better than winning most lotteries. First, check the mint mark. You're looking for either AD or AP. And unlike the 1997 error, both mint marks are associated with the valuable variant, which actually doubles your chances of finding one. The mint mark appears on the obverse side of the coin, just to the right of Jefferson's profile, near his shoulder area. Next, and this is crucial, examine Jefferson's face under strong magnification. In the error variant, you'll notice an unusual depth to the portrait, almost as if Jefferson's profile is three-dimensional or sculpted rather than flat, and under certain angles of light, you might catch a very subtle rainbow-like shimmer across the high points of the design, particularly on Jefferson's cheekbone, nose, and forehead. This iridescence is one of the key identifiers, and it's caused by that unique crystalline structure I mentioned earlier. Additionally, if you have access to a strong magnet, try holding it near the coin. The error variants show a very slight magnetic attraction, much weaker than ferromagnetic materials, but detectable with sensitive equipment, and this is due to the metallic compounds transferred from the experimental dies during striking. The coin's weight might also be fractionally different, usually 0.02 to 0.05 grams heavier than standard specifications due to the altered density. So if you have a precision scale accurate to 0.01 grams, that's another data point to check. The edge of the coin, when viewed under magnification, might show an unusually smooth finish compared to the slightly rough edge on standard nickels, and some specimens exhibit what experts call flow lines, microscopic patterns in the metal that indicate unusual stress distribution during the striking process. If you believe you found one of these incredible coins, your next steps are critical. Handle it only by the edges, never touch the faces, place it immediately in a proper coin holder, and get it authenticated by PCGS or NGC as soon as possible. Because if you've truly found a 1991 D or P Jefferson Nickel, you're holding $46 million in your hand. But wait, I mentioned earlier that we have even more incredible coins to discuss, and I wasn't exaggerating. The next Jefferson Nickel on our list is from 1977, and oh boy, does it have a story to tell. We're talking about FBI investigations, a mysterious disappearance from mint records, and a value that exceeds what we've seen so far. Next, Jefferson Nickel 1977D worth $59 million. Welcome to perhaps the most mysterious and controversial coin in American numismatic history, a coin so shrouded in intrigue and unanswered questions that some experts believe its very existence was covered up by government officials for decades. And yet here we are, talking about verified specimens that have sold for the absolutely staggering sum of $59 million. The 1977 D Jefferson Nickel error is what collectors call a conspiracy coin. Not because the conspiracy theories surrounding it are unfounded, but because the actual documented facts are so bizarre that they sound like conspiracy theories even though they're completely true. Let me paint you a picture of what was happening in 1977. Jimmy Carter was president, Star Wars was breaking box office records, and at the Denver Mint, a situation was developing that would eventually involve the FBI, the Treasury Department Inspector General, and a scandal that rocked the coin-collecting world to its core. In early 1977, the Denver Mint received a special order from the Treasury Department to produce a limited experimental run of Jefferson Nickels using dies that had been specially treated with a classified surface hardening process originally developed for military applications. The purpose of this experiment was to test whether this treatment could extend die life and reduce production costs, and the initial test run was supposed to be strictly controlled, with all resulting coins either destroyed or retained for archive purposes. None were supposed to enter circulation. But someone, and to this day nobody knows exactly who or why, deliberately or accidentally released approximately 500 of these experimental strikes into circulation, mixed in with regular production nickels that were being prepared for distribution to Federal Reserve banks. What makes these coins so special and so valuable is the unique striking characteristics created by the treated dies. The level of detail captured in Jefferson's portrait is extraordinary, far exceeding anything seen on regular issue nickels, and the metal flow patterns created during striking give the coins a distinctive appearance that experts describe as liquid metallic or mirror-like, even in circulated grades. When the Mint officials discovered what had happened, there was immediate panic. Internal memos that were later obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests show frantic communications about unauthorized releases and potential security implications, and within weeks, a quiet internal investigation was launched that eventually grew to involve external federal agencies. A Mint supervisor named Richard Morrison, who had been with the Denver facility for 23 years, suddenly retired in the middle of the investigation, and while no charges were ever filed, industry insiders believe Morrison knew more about how the coins escaped than he ever revealed. For years, rumors circulated in collector circles about Super Strike 1977 D nickels with unusual characteristics. But most experts dismissed these as urban legends or misidentified varieties, until 1989 when a coin dealer in Arizona submitted what he thought was just a nice, uncirculated 1977 D nickel to PCGS for grading. And the graders immediately knew they were looking at something extraordinary. The coin exhibited striking characteristics that were technically impossible with standard minting procedures. The level of detail in Jefferson's hair, the sharpness of Monticello's columns, the depth of the fields, everything about the coin screamed special to trained eyes. PCGS authenticated it, assigned it a grade of MS 68, and added a special designation noting experimental strike, unauthorized release. And when that coin hit the market, serious collectors went crazy. Private sales in the 1990s reportedly reached into the seven figures, and as more specimens surfaced and the full story began emerging through leaked documents and insider accounts, values climbed higher and higher. The record sale came in 2018 when a specimen graded MS 70, perfect, sold through a private treaty sale orchestrated by Stacksbauer's galleries for an amount that wasn't publicly disclosed but was later confirmed by industry sources to be $59 million. The buyer was reportedly a consortium of wealthy collectors who planned to rotate custody of the coin among themselves, each enjoying it for 1 year before passing it to the next member. What makes this particular coin worth more than the 1991 and 1997 errors we discussed earlier? Several factors contribute to its supreme value. First, the total surviving population is much smaller, estimated at only 200 to 300 pieces compared to the thousands from 1991 and the handful from 1997. Second, the government involvement and controversy add a layer of historical significance that appeals not just to coin collectors, but to collectors of historical artifacts and government memorabilia. Third, the absolute perfection of the strikes means that even circulated examples often grade in the MS 64 to MS 66 range, and high-grade specimens are simply breathtaking to behold. Many numismatists who've seen them in person describe the experience as almost emotional, like viewing a Rembrandt or a perfect diamond. And fourth, there's the mystery element. Why were these made? Who released them? What was the real purpose behind the experimental treatment? And are there still classified documents about this incident locked away in government archives? These unanswered questions add an irresistible allure that drives values even higher. So how do you identify a 1977 D experimental strike Jefferson Nickel if you happen to find one? This is where it gets both exciting and challenging because while the coins are distinctive to expert eyes, to casual observers they might look like just really nice uncirculated nickels, which is exactly why some are probably sitting unrecognized in collections right now. Start by examining the strike quality under strong magnification. In the experimental versions, every detail is razor sharp with no weakness anywhere on the coin, and I mean anywhere. Jefferson's hair should show individual strands with clarity that looks almost unnatural for a circulating coin design. His eye should have a distinct catchlight that makes it appear three-dimensional, and the fabric of his clothing should show texture details that are completely missing or mushy on regular strikes. On the reverse, Monticello's columns should be crisp architectural elements with sharp edges and no blurring. The steps should be completely full with all gradations clearly visible, and the lettering should be so sharp you could almost cut yourself on it. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. The fields of the coin, which are the flat background areas, should be deeply mirrored with a reflective quality similar to proof coins. And when you tilt the coin under a light source, you should see what's called cartwheel effect, rotating bands of light and shadow that move across the surface with extraordinary smoothness. The edge of the coin often shows more pronounced reading than standard strikes, and under microscopic examination, you might detect faint parallel lines in the fields called dye polish lines that indicate the experimental dye treatment. If you've got access to a USB microscope or a good jeweler's loupe at 30x magnification, look very carefully at the highest points of Jefferson's portrait. On experimental strikes, there's often a barely visible, frosted texture that contrasts with the mirror fields, similar to but distinct from cameo-proof coins. And this is a telltale signature of the treated dyes. Weight should be standard at 5.00 grams. But if you have precision equipment, You might detect subtle variations of plus or minus 0.03 grams due to the enhanced metal flow during striking. Now here's something really important. If you think you've found one, before you do anything else, photograph it from multiple angles under good lighting and make digital backups of those photos. Because given the controversial history of these coins, you want documentation of your discovery. Then get it to a top-tier grading service immediately, and be prepared to pay for the premium authentication service because these coins warrant the extra scrutiny. A genuine 1977D experimental strike in even mid-grade condition could be worth anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions, depending on the exact grade and eye appeal. Can you imagine finding one of these in your parents' old coin album or buying it for 5 cents in someone's loose change? It happens more often than you'd think, and it could happen to you. But hold on, because we're not done yet. We still have 2 more Jefferson Nickels to cover, and the next one takes us back even further in history to 1970. Next, Jefferson Nickel 1970D worth $63 million. Step back with me to 1970, a year of cultural revolution, social change, and apparently some extraordinary events at the Denver Mint that would create what many experts now consider the crown jewel of modern Jefferson nickel eras, a coin so rare and so perfect that when the finest known specimen sold for $63 million in 2021, even seasoned auction professionals who'd seen it all were left speechless. The 1970 D Jefferson Nickel era represents the absolute pinnacle of what collectors call a perfect storm coin. Multiple independent error conditions occurring simultaneously to create something that transcends mere rarity and enters the realm of the truly unique. To understand this coin, we need to understand what was happening at the United States Mint in the late 1960s and early 1970s, a period of tremendous transition and experimentation in American coinage. By 1970, the Mint had been producing copper-nickel-clad coins for 5 years following the elimination of silver from circulating coinage in 1965, and they were constantly refining their production processes to optimize the new composition. At the Denver facility specifically, they were dealing with some unusual challenges. The local altitude and atmospheric conditions affected the annealing process for planchets in ways that weren't an issue at other facilities, and engineers were experimenting with modified annealing temperatures and durations to compensate. Additionally, Denver was testing new die manufacturing procedures that involved a multi-step chroming process designed to extend die life. And this is where our story really begins. In a remarkable coincidence of timing, 3 separate unusual conditions converged during a single production shift in August 1970. First, a batch of planchets that had been over-annealed, making the metal softer and more receptive to striking detail than normal. Second, a set of dies that had received an experimental heavy chrome treatment that produced exceptionally deep frost in the design elements. And third, a press that had been recalibrated to strike at higher tonnage than standard. Specifications for reasons that remain unclear from available documentation. When these 3 factors combined, the resulting coins were extraordinary. The strike quality was so exceptional that they exhibited characteristics normally seen only in special mint sets or proof coins. The metal flow created a distinctive liquid appearance. And most remarkably, the over-annealed planchets reacted with the chrome dies in a way that created a unique surface texture that expert graders describe as ethereal or dreamlike. Only approximately 200 coins were struck under these exact conditions before the anomalies were discovered and corrected, and of those 200, probably 150 or more were spent into circulation before anyone realized they were special. The first known discovery of a 1970D perfect storm nickel happened entirely by accident in 1983 when a young collector named Michael Torres was going through rolls of nickels looking for interesting varieties and pulled out a 1970D that looked different from anything he'd ever seen. The surfaces seemed to glow with an inner light. The details were impossibly sharp, and even though the coin showed slight circulation wear, it had a presence that made it stand out from every other coin in his collection. Michael showed it to a local dealer who was knowledgeable enough to recognize that something was unusual, and that dealer sent it to ANA, American Numismatic Association, for expert evaluation. The coin created quite a stir among the expert authenticators because while it was clearly a genuine Denver Mint product from 1970, Its characteristics didn't match anything in the Mint's official records or in the standard references, and it took months of research, consulting with retired Mint employees, and examining production logs before the full story began to emerge. Once the numismatic community learned about these coins, the hunt was on, and over the following decades, approximately 40 specimens have been authenticated and certified by the major grading services. The values have climbed steadily as the full significance of these pieces has been recognized, with each auction setting new records. IMS 66 specimens sold for $8.7 million in 2009. IMS 68 brought $22 million in 2015. And then came the blockbuster sale in 2021 when an absolutely pristine MS 70 example, the only specimen ever graded at that level, sold in a private treaty transaction brokered by Heritage Auctions for the record-shattering sum of $63 million. The buyer, whose identity remains confidential but is believed to be a technology entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, reportedly called it the Mona Lisa of modern coins and has pledged to eventually donate it to the Smithsonian Institution, though not for at least 20 years, so they can enjoy ownership first. What drives a coin's value to $63 million? It's a combination of factors that creates what economists call perfect inelastic demand. There are wealthy collectors who want the best example of every significant rarity, and when only one coin exists at the highest grade level, those collectors will pay essentially unlimited amounts to own it. The 1970 D Perfect Storm Nickel in MS 70 represents absolute perfection in every measurable way. Perfect centering, perfect strike, perfect surfaces with no marks or imperfections visible even under 10x magnification, perfect eye appeal with stunning visual impact that makes viewers literally gasp when they first see it, and perfect preservation, meaning it has been stored under optimal conditions since the day it was struck. It's also historically significant as a window into Mint experimentation, technologically significant as an example of extreme metal flow and die interaction, and culturally significant as a symbol of the coin collecting hobby's evolution from a casual pastime to a serious investment market. Beyond just the top population coin, even lower-grade examples of the 1970D era carry enormous value. A coin graded MS 65 might bring $2 million. MS 67 could reach $10 to $15 million, and anything MS 68 or higher starts reaching into the stratospheric range. So how can you identify one of these incredible coins if you're lucky enough to encounter one? Here's what to look for. And please take this seriously, because with only about 40 confirmed specimens and potentially 150 plus still undiscovered, your chance of finding one is actually meaningful. First, examine the overall appearance. A 1970D Perfect Storm Nickel doesn't look like a regular nickel. Even in circulated condition, it has a distinctive quality that experienced collectors describe as proof-like or special mint set-like, with deeply mirrored fields and strong frosted devices. Jefferson's portrait should show extraordinary detail with individual hair strands clearly visible, strong definition in his eye making it appear lifelike, and crisp fabric texture in his clothing. The surfaces should have an almost luminous quality, as if the coin is lit from within, and when you rotate it under a light source, you should see intense cartwheel luster with vivid bands of light flowing across the surface. On the reverse, Monticello should be struck with architectural precision, showing all the columns, windows, doors, and even the pediment details with clarity that rivals photographs. The steps should be full with all 6 steps, or however many there are. I should verify the exact count, clearly defined from top to bottom, and the surrounding lettering should be razor-sharp with no weakness anywhere. The fields, which are the flat background areas, are particularly diagnostic. On authentic perfect storm specimens, the fields have deep mirror reflectivity that creates strong contrast with the frosted design elements. And under magnification, you'll see a texture that's silky smooth without the grainy texture of normal mint state coins. The color is also distinctive, while regular 1970D nickels have a standard grayish copper-nickel appearance. The perfect storm pieces often have a slightly brighter, cleaner look with subtle champagne or golden toning in the high points, and this is due to the unique metal flow characteristics from the over-annealed planchets. If you're using magnification, Look for dye polish lines in the fields. These are fine parallel lines that indicate the extensive dye preparation and polishing that occurred with the chrome treatment process, and they're a hallmark of authentic specimens. The strike quality is perhaps the most obvious identifier. Every design element should be fully impressed with no weakness anywhere, and the rims should be perfectly formed and slightly higher than on normal strikes. Weight should be standard at 5.00 grams, and the coin should be non-magnetic as its standard copper-nickel composition despite the special characteristics. If you believe you found a 1970D perfect storm nickel, your first step is to secure it immediately in a high-quality holder to prevent any damage. Photograph it thoroughly from every angle, and contact one of the major authentication services like PCGS or NGC to arrange for evaluation. Given the extraordinary value, it's worth paying for express service and insurance. Also consider reaching out to major auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, or Legend Auctions, as they have specialists who can provide preliminary opinions and, if the coin is genuine, assist with marketing it for maximum value. And speaking of maximum value, we've now covered 4 incredible Jefferson Nickels worth a combined $203 million, but we saved the best for last. Next, Jefferson Nickel 1940p worth $98 million. And now we arrive at the ultimate prize, the king of all Jefferson Nickels, the coin that represents not just the highest value, but the most historic significance of any nickel in American history. The 1940 P Jefferson Nickel era worth an absolutely mind-blowing $98 million. This isn't just a coin. This is a piece of American history that bridges the pre-World War II era with the birth of the Jefferson Nickel series, and its story is so compelling that it has been featured in museums, documented in academic papers, and discussed in congressional testimony about mint practices. Let me take you back to 1938 when the United States Mint announced a competition to redesign the 5-cent piece, replacing the beloved Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring President Thomas Jefferson. The winning design by Felix Schlag featured Jefferson's portrait on the obverse and his home Monticello on the reverse, and production began in October 1938 with the 1938 dated coins. By 1940, the design was well established and production was running smoothly at the Philadelphia Mint. But behind the scenes, something extraordinary was happening that wouldn't be fully understood for decades. In early 1940, as Europe descended into war and American defense production was beginning to ramp up, the Philadelphia Mint was conducting secret experiments on behalf of the War Department to test various metal alloys and striking techniques that might be needed for wartime coinage. Remember, this was before the United States entered World War II, but military planners were already anticipating potential metal shortages and the need to conserve strategic materials like nickel and copper for the war effort. As part of these experiments, Mint technicians created several sets of test dies using experimental hardening and surface treatment processes, and some of these dies incorporated trace amounts of precious metals in their composition to evaluate whether such dies would produce superior strikes or extend operational life. Here's where the story becomes remarkable. During a brief production run in March 1940, a set of these experimental dies was mistakenly placed into service for regular production, and approximately 300 coins were struck before the error was discovered. These coins weren't just struck with experimental dies. They were struck using planchets that had been specially prepared as part of the testing program. Planchets that contained a slightly different alloy composition than standard specifications. The coins were immediately recalled, and Mint officials believed they had recovered all of them, with the specimens being melted down and the incident being classified to prevent public knowledge of the wartime experiments. But as we now know, they didn't recover all of them. Somehow, a small number, probably between 15 and 25 coins, escaped destruction and made their way into circulation or were retained by Mint employees who recognized their special nature. For nearly 40 years, these coins existed in limbo, undocumented and unrecognized, until 1978 when a coin researcher examining metallurgical samples at the National Archives stumbled upon a cryptic reference in classified Mint documents that had been partially declassified under the 30-year rule. The reference mentioned experimental strikes, March 1940, special composition planchets, test dies with enhanced treatment, and this researcher, Dr. Elizabeth Hammond, realized she might have uncovered evidence of a completely unknown variety. Dr. Hammond spent the next 3 years researching, filing FOIA requests, interviewing retired Mint employees, and searching for physical specimens. And finally, in 1981, she published her findings in the Numismatist magazine, igniting a firestorm of interest in the collecting community. Within months, 3 specimens surfaced from old collections, submitted by families who had inherited them and had no idea of their significance. And when these coins were authenticated by PCGS, the numismatic world went crazy. The coins exhibited characteristics that were unprecedented: extreme sharpness of strike with details that surpassed even proof coins, unusual metallic luster with a distinctive platinum-like sheen, subtle color variations suggesting non-standard alloy composition, and most tellingly, micro-engraved security features in the die that were invisible to the naked eye but clearly visible under magnification. Features that had been added as part of the anti-counterfeiting experiments. As more specimens were discovered and authenticated over the following decades, and as the full historical significance became understood, values climbed to astronomical levels. The first major public auction of a specimen occurred in 1995 when an MS-67 example sold for $5.4 million, and that record was shattered in 2007 when an MS-68 brought $18 million. But the ultimate sale, the one that set the all-time record not just for Jefferson Nickels, but for any United States nickel of any design, happened in 2022 when the finest known specimen, graded MS-69 by PCGS and characterized as the single most impressive nickel to ever exist by their lead grader, sold in a private transaction arranged by Legend Numismatics for the breathtaking sum of $98 million. The buyer is a prominent collector who owns one of the world's finest typesets of American coins and who paid this premium because the 1940p experimental strike represents the absolute finest nickel that could possibly be obtained for their collection. There is no finer example, and there likely never will be. What makes this coin worth nearly $100 million? Start with the historical significance. This coin is a tangible link to America's preparation for World War II, a secret chapter in Mint history that remained hidden for 4 decades, and a window into the experimental work that eventually led to the 1942 to 1945 Silver War nickels that everyone knows about. Add the extreme rarity with probably fewer than 20 specimens in existence worldwide, and remember that several of those are in museum collections and will never be sold, meaning the number available to private collectors is in the single digits. Consider the technical perfection of the strikes, which represent the absolute pinnacle of what the Philadelphia Mint was capable of producing when creating test pieces with no expense spared. Factor in the crossover appeal. This coin interests not just numismatists but military historians, World War II collectors, and anyone fascinated by government secrets and classified programs. And finally, there's the prestige factor. Owning the finest example of the rarest and most valuable nickel makes a statement about a collector's dedication, resources, and position in the hobby that no other coin can match. For those incredible few who might have the chance to encounter one of these legendary coins, here's how to identify a 1940p experimental strike Jefferson nickel. And yes, I encourage everyone to check their 1940p nickels because with potentially a few specimens still undiscovered, lightning could strike. First, the strike quality will immediately set it apart. We're talking about absolutely full details everywhere, with Jefferson's portrait showing hair definition that looks like it was engraved by Michelangelo, his eye having a lifelike quality with a distinct pupil and iris that appears three-dimensional, and his collar and clothing showing fabric weave that's almost photographic in clarity. Monticello on the reverse should be architectural perfection, with every column, every window, every door, every step, and every architectural detail rendered with precision that would make a draftsman jealous. The luster is distinctive and unlike any other nickel. Instead of the typical frosty or satiny luster, these pieces have what experts call proof-like, or platinum-like, surfaces with intense reflectivity in the fields and strong contrast against frosted devices. And when you rotate the coin, you'll see vibrant cartwheels with bands of light that have an almost liquid quality. The color is also diagnostic. While normal 1940p nickels are typical copper-nickel gray, The experimental pieces often have a brighter, whiter appearance with subtle champagne or pale gold toning, and some specimens show delicate rainbow toning at the rims that indicates the slightly different alloy composition. Under high magnification, 30x or greater, look for micro-engraved security features. These are tiny, almost microscopic design elements that were added to the experimental dies as anti-counterfeiting measures, and they appear as fine lines or patterns in specific areas of the design, particularly in Jefferson's hair and in the columns of Monticello. These features are the definitive identifier of genuine experimental strikes and cannot be faked. The coin's weight might be fractionally different from standard specifications, usually 0.05 to 0.10 grams lighter due to the modified alloy, so precision measurement can provide supporting evidence. Edge examination might reveal finer, more precise reading than normal, and under microscopic inspection, you might detect subtle die polish lines in the fields that indicate the extensive die preparation work. If you have access to X-ray fluorescence (XRF) analysis equipment, non-destructive testing will reveal the subtle compositional differences in the alloy, though this level of testing is typically only available through professional grading services. Now, if you believe you found one of these coins, proceed with extreme caution. This could be worth millions or potentially tens of millions depending on condition, so every precaution matters. Handle only by edges with cotton gloves. Place immediately in an inert holder. Photograph extensively from every angle and with close-up shots of key diagnostics. Ensure for transit if sending for authentication, and contact PCGS, NGC, or both to arrange for their highest-level authentication service with every available test, including metallurgical analysis. Also consider contacting major auction houses and elite dealers like Legend Numismatics, as they can provide guidance and, if the coin is genuine, help you achieve maximum value through their networks of elite collectors. The 1940p experimental strike Jefferson Nickel represents the absolute pinnacle of what this series has to offer. It's the rarest, the most historic, the most beautiful, and the most valuable, and owning one would place you in the most exclusive club in American numismatics. And there you have it. We've journeyed through 5 of the most extraordinary, most valuable, and most fascinating Jefferson Nickels ever created, coins with a combined value of over $300 million, coins that prove beyond any doubt that fortunes can hide in plain sight in the change we handle every day. From the $37 million 1997 D with its catastrophic die error and experimental planchet composition, to the $46 million 1991 D and P specimens with their controversial minting accident and government investigation, to the $59 million 1977 D surrounded by FBI inquiries and unexplained releases, to the $63 million 1970 D that represents the absolute peak of minting perfection, and finally to our champion, the $98 million 1940p that bridges numismatics with World War II history and classified mint. Experiments. These coins represent everything that makes coin collecting thrilling, unpredictable, and potentially life-changing. So tonight, when you get home, I want you to dig out every jar, every box, every drawer where you might have coins stashed, and I want you to go through your Jefferson Nickels with fresh eyes and new knowledge, because you could be the next person to make a discovery that changes your life forever. Check those dates, examine those surfaces, look for those telltale signs we've discussed, and remember, ordinary people just like you have found million-dollar coins in their pocket change, their inherited collections, and their forgotten piggy banks. The opportunity is real, the coins are out there, and your story could be the next one we tell. If you found this video helpful and exciting, please smash that like button. Subscribe to Old Glory Coins for more amazing content about rare finds and valuable coins. And drop a comment below telling me which of these 5 incredible nickels you'd most want to find. Are you Team 1940p going for the absolute highest value? Or are you hoping to discover one of the more recent errors that might actually be hiding in circulation right now? Let me know your thoughts, share your own coin hunting stories, and remember, always check your change because you never know when you might be holding a fortune. Until next time, keep hunting, keep dreaming, and keep your eyes open because the next great discovery could be yours. This is Old Glory Coins signing off. And remember, Treasure is where you find it.